So again, good morning, and thank you for joining this morning. The continuity of our class on the stages of path to enlightenment. So again, as usual, we will start with the quieting our mind, followed by generating good intention about being here, and then the prayer, and then we start discussions. So just try to make yourself relaxed, comfortable as much as possible. And try to quiet your mind by watching the breath. Then we can think, may us coming here together, giving our precious time and energy, may it become cause and conditions to transform our heart, transform our mind. May it become cause and condition to actualize all the realization or spiritual experiences of the stages of the path to enlightenment. And especially the realization of wisdom and the compassion. And may it become cause and condition to obtain the fully awakened state. So we can be most greatest help and benefit to each and every sentient beings. In more profound way. Okay. To the founder, the India transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the four destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and eight good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teachers of God and human beings. Disappear into emptiness. I think maybe we might have a realization of emptiness.
I'm sorry, give me just a moment.
Yes. Take time. Yeah. To the founder, the endowed, transcendental destroyer, the one gone beyond, the fourth destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world, supreme guide for human beings to be tamed, teacher of God and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendental destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdued from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offering, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dhamma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three, ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, Adam. In all aspects, with a supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action. Perform only perfect virtuous action. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. To this merit may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the four or false, and the deliver from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. We go to the mandala offering next. Yeah. So she be chung xin me do da ti ra lin shi yin de yen ba de sang ge xin do mi de u wa do kun nama da xin I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I created through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient. Sangye chodang soge sonam la changchu padu dane. Dagi shushe gibe sonam ge dola penche samge doba. Sangye chodang soge sonam changchu padu dane. Dagi shushe gibe sonam dola penche samge doba shu. So last week we discussed from the Lama Choba verse. I think we discussed the 86 and verse number 86, LC 86. That was what we discussed last week. By understanding, if we are born in one of the lower realms, not only in many, the suffering will be more intense and long durations, but most importantly, the opportunity to practice the Dharma will be very difficult and very limited. And therefore, in order to protect ourselves from taking a rebirth in a lower rebirth, then we go for refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And having gone to the refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, then we try to keep the precept and the basic precepts is trying to live our life according to 10 virtuous actions and trying to refrain from 10 non-virtuous actions. And if we can live our life according to living the virtues, and then definitely through that practice and that Dharma, the practice, that practice, which is the Dharma, will definitely protect us from taking a rebirth in unfortunate, more suffering, low rebirth. And so, and through that practice, even though we are able to protect ourselves from such low rebirth and the suffering of the low rebirth, and then have a high rebirth such as human life, whether it's human or high rebirth such as a deva or demi-deva, three high rebirth, any of those three rebirth, definitely we have more opportunity to practice the Dharma. Definitely there's more, there's less suffering compared to the lower rebirth. But still, we are still not free from the samsara. As long as we take a rebirth within any of the 6 realms, no matter where we are, still we are not free from the samsara. And as long as we are in samsara, we will continue to experience the suffering, So we are not really free from the suffering at all. Even though suffering might be a little bit less intense, and in terms of durations, less lasting than some of the lower rebirth, but again, still we are not free from the suffering because we are in samsara. Still we are in samsara. So if we do not want any kind of suffering, if we do not wish any suffering, then we have to liberate ourselves from the samsara and the cause of the samsara. Samsara means, no freedom. Samsara means, suffering. Samsara means that we are under the control of another force instead of having control ourselves. So therefore one need to practice in order to free from the whole samsara itself and the cause of the samsara. And so I think that is where the next verse numbers, where it comes, 87, verse number 87, LC 87, I think in page number 2, where it says, violently tossed amidst wave of karma and delusions, plagued by the many sea monster of three kind of suffering, I seek your blessing to develop intense longing to be liberated for this infinite and frightening great ocean of existence. So samsara is like the great oceans of, existence. And then within that great oceans of samsara, then we experience many types of sufferings. No matter where you are, as long as we are in samsara, we experience the sufferings, different types of sufferings, And so here it talk about 3 types of suffering, and in lamrim, and if you read many of the lamrim, and they talk about 8 types of suffering, 6 types of sufferings, 3 types of suffering here. So we can meditate on that. And the more we meditate on that, the more we understand, because we see as long as we're in samsara is a natural suffering. So then you develop a longing and wish to free from that samsara. And once you have that wish and longing to free from the samsara, then we will try to practice to overcome the cause and condition that give to the lead us to samsara and experience the suffering because we are in samsara. And through that, then we engage into the path in order to free from the cause of the suffering. And so therefore, first we have to understand what the samsara is, and how we suffer if we are in samsara. Mm. And so here, I won't go in details with the 8 type of suffering, 6 type of suffering, but as it mentioned in the verse itself, we can talk about a little bit of 3 type of sufferings. I think suffering is not the right word, I think, but I think there is no other word that fits exactly. So I think we'll use the suffering, because I think that when we use the English word suffering, I think, it doesn't really give the whole context of what it means dukkha, or in Tibetan dungal, but I guess since we don't have any other better translation, so we have to use that, and I think that is problem with the language, sometimes you just have to use that is most closest, even though it is not exactly, it doesn't fit everything. And you will understand why it is. And therefore also you will understand sometimes why different teachers, different translators use slightly different. Sometimes instead of using suffering, some of them, they use like, dissatisfactions, because when we talk about 3 types of suffering, we are not just talking about physical pain or even emotional pain. Sometimes in this, the dissatisfaction is part of suffering. It is described here. Being under the control of another force, such as your own delusion, karma, is regarded as suffering here. So therefore, here when we talk about 3 types of suffering, it's much more broader, not the way we relate. When we think of suffering, we relate with either is physical, emotional pain. But here is go a little bit more deeper than that, so anyway, so 3 types of suffering. Sometimes it is translated suffering or pain. So obviously that we all understand that as a suffering or pain, So sometimes we have physical pain, sometimes we have emotional pains, and we recognize that as a suffering. Not only we recognize that as a suffering, even the animal recognize those as a suffering, isn't it? If you observe the animals, they try to avoid that kind of pain. They try to avoid that kind of pain. Why? Because they understand it's a pain, it's a suffering, and they don't want that. The reason they try to avoid it because they know it's something undesirable, something painful, and they do not wish that. So that kind of suffering, understanding that suffering as a suffering, the suffering of pain as suffering, is not as, not as so difficult. Even the animal realize that. Even the ants, they realize that, if you try to do it, they try to avoid that because they know it is painful. So that is the suffering of pain. And sometimes a lot of time when we talk about suffering, a lot of time we try to relate with only that suffering, the suffering of pain. But here, when Buddha said, samsara is nature of suffering, then, he goes much more deeper than that. So then second one, sometimes it's translated as suffering of change, and the suffering of change is most of all our samsaric pleasure in our samsaric world, in our ordinary samsaric world, what we call pleasure, happiness, Here the Buddha is saying that is suffering. Now it's a big, it's like being hit with a big hammer on our head. Something that we thought that is the pleasure, something we thought that is happiness, something that we have been running after that because we think that is the happiness, that is something we need. And so our life, we try to run after all to get all that, those kind of pleasure and happiness. And so we run after the cause and condition, that might give that kind of samsaric temporary pleasures and happiness. And here the Buddha is saying, well, that is also suffering. So, and it kind of blow our mind, it what are you talking about, everything that I do in my life, you are saying all this is useless, that is not really giving me any happiness. And basically Buddha is saying, yes, basically, and what it means is those samsaric pleasures, many of them, most of them, if you continue to kind of try, many of them turn into pain, suffering. Eating at the very beginning, there's a little bit of pleasure, and you keep on eating and eating. After 1-2 hours, you started to experience pain. You regret. I wish I didn't eat too much. I should have stopped a little bit earlier. I ate too much. Now I have I feel my stomach is having some problems. It turned into pain as you start doing. Same thing, when you are cold, you want to be in sun. And you try to remain in sun for a while, and it starts to become, again, unbearable, too hot. The pleasure that you got at the very beginning, after some time, it transforms and changes into something painful. And then you have been in sun for a while, and it's too hot, it's unbearable, it's pain, it's suffering. So then you want to go inside, more cooler. And then after, again, some time, even though at the very beginning, there's a little bit of pleasant feeling, pleasure. Then after some time, again, it becomes a little bit too cold, unbearable. Then you want to go in the sun again. And this is nothing complicated philosophy. It's our experience. It's our direct experience. And Buddha is just pointing to us, watch, observe your feeling. That kind of samsaric feelings, pleasures, so-called pleasures. A lot of time they transform into pain as you started to experience that over the time. So the happiness, the pleasure does not last. Such pleasure, happiness does not last. It's only there for, short durations. And after that, then it does not become any more pleasure anymore. It's not enjoyable anymore after some time. And whatever enjoyment, pleasure, and feeling you had, it's gone now. It doesn't last. And a lot of those feelings also lead to feeling of dissatisfactions, Doesn't really give you a true satisfactions, So that is why it's called suffering. That is why it's not true happiness. Because if it is a true happiness, the more you enjoy it, the more pleasure it has to give you. But that is not the case. It is like, something bitter that is coated outside, coated by sugar, and from outside it looks like sweet because it's coated by a sweet. But actually, if you started to chew it, you started to bite it slowly, then you started to feel the bitterness. Like some of the medicine, is a bitter, but then because you don't like bitter, then it's coated with the sugar, So you think, oh, it's very sweet. You like it. And you think it's really sweet, but actually it's not really sweet. It's really bitter. But it is outside, it's being coated by sweetness. And later, when you find the bitterness, that is what it really is. And that is what it is saying, All our samsaric happiness, joy, that like the sweet that has been coated, but inside is bitterness. And so the nature of our such experience are actually, in a way, it is a not true happiness, If we understand that, then we will not be so, if we have that understanding, experiential understanding, realization through our practice, meditations, then we will not be so attached to it. Like you don't like something bitterness, okay? For example, you don't like something bitterness. And then, medicine that has been on the bitter is coated by sweetness. Because you understand that, so you don't get so attached to that, even though there is a little bit sweetness outside. But because it is bitter inside and you don't like bitter, so therefore you will not be so attached to it. But of course, as a medicine, you need to take it, whether you like it or not. But at least you will not be attached to it. Do you get it? You have to take it because it's a medicine that you need to take for your health. But you wouldn't be so attached to it. Why? Because it is a bitter. And same thing, a lot of things we have to do a lot of things that we have to do in our life because, we have to be healthy, we have to be alive, we need to practice. But at the same time, you wouldn't be so attached to everything, So you enjoy the sun, you enjoy the heat, you enjoy the cold, you enjoy the food, you enjoy everything without attachments. You enjoy it because it is needed. But at the same time, there's no attachment, grasping. When you have it, it's great. When you don't have it, you don't become so miserable. Isn't it? When you have it, that is wonderful. And even you don't have it, also, I'm okay with that. So it doesn't become so miserable. But when there is attachment and grasping, then, when you don't have that, then it becomes miserable. Then your life becomes miserable. You start to miss it. It becomes miserable because you can't get that. And because you are so attached to that. And going even further, Lama Tsongkhapa, explains, is an interesting way of looking at it, Even the very joyfulness or pleasant feeling that we have of those experiences in samsara, even though we feel it's a pleasant and happiness and joyfulness, but actually it is not. You feel that it's a joyfulness because compared to other suffering, it's a less, is a lighter. Because it's a lighter, you feel like it is a joy. Not because it's happiness, because compared to something which worth, it seems it's very nice. Very interesting, I think that logic and that way of looking at this, and it makes totally sense. Example is, for example, you have been running, jogging, exercising, whatever, hiking, whatever for a long time, and you are starting to get tired, So your body is starting to get tired, Your legs starting to get tired. So the pain from doing the exercise, jogging, hiking that you have been in a long time, so your body become kind of a little bit kind of painful. And then you relax, you sit. After long of that, when you started to come to the car after a long hiking, when you sit on the cushion, you feel, so relief, so pleasant. But sitting on the cushion or your car itself is not pleasant. Or extremely joyfulness. But because you have been so tired from walking or hiking or jogging, sitting, compared to that, started to feel so good, so nice, joyful. If you have not been walking, hiking, exercising, just by sitting there, you wouldn't get that same feeling of joyfulness. Do you get it? So what it says is you have that joyfulness because that is less painful than when you are doing a lot of exercise. So because compared to that pain, this one is less painful, therefore you started to feel it's a joyfulness. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. I think it's, yeah. And that is just an example, but that is with all our experience. You can relate that with all experience, other experience similarly. In only relation to something that you feel is a joyfulness, but actually by itself is not really joy, is not real happiness. And then further, the third, what is as translated sometime, the suffering of all pervasive. So here, the reason why it is said all pervasive is because the suffering of pain is not pervasive in all 6 realms. Some realms are suffering of pain. Some realms, they don't have suffering of pain. Some within the samsaric being, some of them experience suffering of pain, and some of them do not. And even in our own life, sometimes we experience suffering of pain, sometimes we don't experience suffering of pain. Some days we just emotionally, physically, we feel just fine. So we don't experience suffering of pain all the time. But once in a while, we feel that. Sometimes we have physical pain, sometimes we have emotional pains, but that is not all the time. And same with suffering of change. The suffering of change, some of the realms, some of the sentient beings in the 6 realms, they experience suffering of change, and some of the sentient beings 6 realms, some of them, they do not experience suffering of change. But the third part, the suffering of all pervasive, is pervasive in all 6 realms. And not only in all 6 realms, we are experiencing the third part all the time, 24 hours. We don't experience suffering of change, suffering of pain 24 hours. We don't experience suffering of change 24 hours, but we do experience suffering of all pervasive for 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24/7. We experience that. And so that is why it is called pervasive suffering, because it pervades all the time to all the sentient beings of 6 realms. So again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the suffering, the word is a little bit kind of when we look from the term, from English point of view, is probably not the right word, but again, we don't have the best word. So what it means is when our own being, our own aggregates, our own life is under the control of the delusions and the karma, that is this third suffering, all pervasive suffering. As long as we're in samsara, we are always, unless we're free from the samsara, we are always under the influence, under the control of the karma and the delusions. 24/7. And this only not one being of one particular realm, but all 6 realms beings are same. They are still in samsara because they are still under the control of the delusions and the karma. And other suffering, the suffering of change and suffering of pain, arises because on the basis of that. The third one is the basis of other 2 suffering as well. And that is the worst suffering. Even though immediately is not as painful as suffering of pain, but it is the worst one. It's the worst one. And so when you don't have control on your own aggregate, your own beings, your own state, your own life, when it is being controlled by some, karma and the delusions, that itself is a suffering, because we are a slave of another force. We become prisoner of our own delusions. We become prisoner of our own karma. We become our prisoner and slave. And so when you become prisoner and slave of your own delusions and your karma, that itself is suffering. That itself is suffering. Not having that total freedom. So therefore, when we try to, understand true nature of the suffering within the samsara, we have to understand that part, this one. As I said, the suffering of pain, even the animal realize that as a suffering. Some practitioners realize the suffering of change as suffering. But many of them do not realize all pervasive suffering as a suffering. That means that when your own aggregate, your own being, your own life, when you are under the control of delusion karma, that itself is a suffering. With that understanding, that being as a suffering, then we need to develop a strong wish to free from that suffering. Strong longing and wish to free and liberate from that third part of the suffering. If you are only kind of looking to free from suffering or pain, then even some of the rams in Deva, in Deva rams, they don't have suffering of pain. So even though you take a rebirth there, even though you don't have suffering or pain, but you are still in samsara. You are not free from samsara. Why? Because you are not free from the third suffering, all pervasive suffering. Because even your being there is still influenced and controlled by the delusion and the karma. So in order to free from the samsara completely, then we need to understand the all pervasive suffering as a suffering, something that as a suffering, something that you do not want, something you do not wish, something you want to be free from, something you want to be liberated from that third suffering. So I think enough of suffering. Yeah. I think enough of suffering. Don't talk too much of suffering. Let's talk about blissfulness. Blissfulness sounds better than suffering. Why not talk about something blissfulness? So once we understand the nature of samsara is nature of suffering, and then we started to develop a strong intentions, wish or longing to free from the samsara, whole samsara. And once you have that longing and wish to free from the samsara, if you want to free from the samsara, then we have to understand what is the cause of the samsara and what is the cause of the suffering. Because unless you are free from the cause of the suffering and samsara, even you are free temporarily, but again, you will experience later. Because we are not trying to fix the problem itself, because we will be trying to fix the symptoms. That is what we do most time at the moment. We are trying to fix the symptom, and we don't go to the very root of that symptom, the disease itself, the real problem itself. So in order to fix the problem permanently, not just temporarily, you have to go to the very root of the problem itself. Isn't it? At the moment, it's like, when you have something, headache, fever, because of something else, maybe you have something else, real problem, then you have that symptom, then you take some medication to cure the headache, fever. It solves the problem for a little bit. It reduces the pain for a little bit, but it doesn't solve the problem. Then again, tomorrow or next week, then again, you will have the fever coming back, the headache coming back, because the very root of that, the actual problem, the actual illness has not been deal with that. And so therefore we have to go to not the symptom, but the very cause of that. And so suffering is a symptom. The suffering is the symptom, and the root of that suffering, the real problem, and the root of that suffering, of that symptom, is the delusion karma, as here it describes. So if you don't want that suffering, the symptom, then you have to go to the very root of that. That is the karma and the delusions. And even though karma and the delusions are the root of the suffering, the symptom, but among them, the delusion is much more worse, because even you purify all the karma, negative karma you have created in the past, you have purified completely, but as long as you are delusions, you will continue to create new karma. So it's never ending. It will like you clean your area, and then again, the wind blows, again, more leaves fall down. Again, you clean it, again, more winds, again, more. So you can never end up cleaning it, because as long as there's the wind, as long as there's the leaves that falls with the wind, so similarly, so even though both karma and the delusion are the cause of the suffering, but among those, the delusion is the worst. Okay, so we have to pay more attention to the delusions. If we pay more attention to the delusion, and if we overcome delusions, even we might have a lot of negative karma from the past that has not been purified. it will not produce any result suffering, because there's no delusion to activate that negative karma. And I guess that is a good news. I guess that is a good news. No matter how much negative karma we might have created from the beginningless time, if we can overcome the delusions, all this negative karma will be like a seed that never gets water. Therefore, it cannot produce the plant. So it's like a kind of, So, and I think again, the karma is another big subject in Buddhism. Again, I don't know how much we want to talk so much about it. I think one way of understanding the karma, is, first of all, we have to understand the law of cause and effect in general. Okay. If we look everything around, the planet that we live in, the environment, everything that is surrounding us, we see, the law of cause and effect. We don't have difficulty understanding that, isn't it? Because of certain changes, of whether it's naturally or whether it's human created, then we have climate problems. The change in climate, and because of that, then there's problems. We all understand that. Why we have problems? Because there's changes. The changes, whether it is created by human beings' behavior or whether it's naturally, or combination of both. And we understand that same with our economic systems. When you engage in a certain system, then it produces certain result. And we understand with our health, also with our health, according to our lifestyle, diet, it affects our health. And it is just the way certain cause and conditions produce certain result. It's just a natural law of cause and effect, just like the law of gravity, Just like the law of gravity, there's a law of cause and effect. And within this law of cause and effect, then, with the sentient beings and their minds involved into that law of cause and effect, then it produces different experience to those different sentient beings. Okay. Unlike the external cause and condition where they don't have the involvement of intentions, the seed that produce the plant, the seed does not have the consciousness involved there, but of course there's a natural law of cause and effect. And within human beings, there's involvement of our human mind, our intentions, our human mind. And with involvement of our human mind, then we create certain cause and conditions that produce certain experiences. When our negative mind is involved, when our delusions and non-virtues and negative mind is involved, and with involvement, that kind of negative minds, and we create certain cause and conditions that produce particular experience, unpleasant experience, painful experience, suffering. On the other hand, when our mind, when our attitude, when our intentions, sentient beings involved in a more virtuous mind, more positive minds, more good mind involved, intention involved. With that involvement, we create certain cause and conditions, and that produce certain experience. That is more pleasant experience, joyful experience. And so that is, so I think that, law of cause and effect, I think, in general, law of cause effect, I think we don't have any problem with that, isn't it? If you have that understanding, then within that context of that general law of cause and effect, and when individual sentient beings, when their mind get involved, and through being involved with their mind and create certain cause and conditions, then certain experience are experienced, and that is what we call karma and karmic result. Karma actually means actions. In English, if you translate directly, it is a kind of actions. And again, I think I have already mentioned many times in the past, and you have heard many times from me, many of you. There is a general misunderstanding of karma a lot of time. One of misunderstanding of karma is that karma is kind of like fixed, Everything has been fixed by your karma, so you can't do anything about it. That is one misunderstanding. There is sense of understanding karma as like a determined already before, fix the result, so that you can't do anything about it. That is one of misunderstanding about the karma. Karma is evolving all the time. That is why the word actions is good, because actions means it's constantly happening. And when constantly moving, constantly happening, then there's always things could change. Your karma could change moment by moment. Thereby your experience could change moment by moment. Result could change moment by moment. So therefore, the idea that all your experience of this life has been already fixed from the past is totally misunderstanding. And sometimes I see that sometimes. And another misunderstanding is this about, karma being almost like taken from like a punishment and reward, And I guess maybe it comes from cultural background. Even maybe you don't believe some of the, but I think still in this society that has been influenced by a certain spiritual path has a strong impact. So then even when you left behind certain path or certain spiritual path and you come to Buddhism, which has different views such as karma and no creator God or creator Buddha, but actually karma, your own karma. And then again, almost there is this almost taking, as though there is someone, when you experience negative karma, as though someone there's who is punishing you. And when out of your positive karma, when things started to get well, as though there is someone who is rewarding you, Buddha is rewarding you for your good karma, and Buddha is punishing you for your bad karma. Sometimes there is, again, misunderstanding of that. That is another as I mentioned, there's nothing to do with punishment and rewarding. It's just the law of cause and effect. For example, this year you didn't get good water, so your apple tree didn't produce good apple. Okay, and there's no concept of being punished for that. Do you have any concept of being punished? We don't have. Next year you get good rain, good water, and then it produces a lot of apple. And we don't have this idea of being rewarded. Someone rewarding, but we just understand it's the law of cause and effect. You know, certain cause there was not enough certain cause, and therefore it didn't produce well. And then this year there was better cause and better conditions, therefore it produced. That is, and same thing, that is how we have to also took from our experiences, you know. So because sometimes, you know, I feel certain practitioner, even when they have been practicing the Dharma for a long time, when certain things doesn't go so well in their life and some obstacles arises, challenges arises, then they started to feel like almost they are being punished. I've been practicing so well. Why did it happen to me? It shouldn't be happening to me, you know, and all this kind of, that kind of attitude. Or, you know, my life should be improving, should be getting better, and everything should be better because I've been creating a lot of positive karma, and I'm trying to be virtuous, and I'm trying to practice, and it's not happening. And then as though you are shouting for someone out there who's not listening to you. Do you get it what I mean? Even though we do not accept Creator God, Creator Buddha, and we accept it's our own actions. But when we experience those things, as though, you know, we are asking the Buddhas, why don't you help me? And then we started to become, you know, oh, maybe, you know, Buddha is not helping me. He's not kind enough. He's not compassionate enough. Those come from, I think, not fully understanding of the karma, you know. And of course, you know, as I mentioned, the concept of karma is very, very, and I always say, you know, karma, one way looking is very simple, is law of cause and effect. But when you go detail, it can be a little bit complicating, you know. So simple as well as complex as well as simple. And it all depends on our state of mind. If we want to make complex, then everything becomes complex. If we keep it simple, everything can become simple. And sometimes it is not the subject itself. Sometimes it's our mind that make more complicating. Sometimes even though it is simple, because it's a law of cause and effect. And karma, when you talk about karma, is talking about internal law of cause and effect, not the external cause. There is external cause and effect, and there is internal cause and effect. And the way they functions is similar. And when you talk about internal cause and condition, then it means that, you know, there are living beings or sentient beings whose mind is involved as part of cause and conditions, and then resolve the experience experienced by those sentient beings. So that's internal cause. That is internal cause and conditions. So, so I think I'm going to kind of leave it here about the karma, okay? Without going. And so as I mentioned, you know, the karma, our experience, our result of our own karmic karma or our own actions, and the sufferings are created by our own unwholesome I think maybe we don't have to share this one. I guess everyone has that. I think it's okay. Yeah. So what was I? Yeah. So we were talking about the karma, the actions. So our sufferings are a result of our own unwholesome actions or karma. And unwholesome actions and karma is created because of our unwholesome thoughts, attitude, and the mind. And basically, whatever different translation word we use, delusions, afflictive emotions, destructive emotion, negative emotions, so yeah, I think whatever we use it, but basically it's the delusions. So as I mentioned before, among the karma and the delusion is the much more worse, because delusion act one as a seed and as well as is secondary or corroborative cause as well, like the water as well. And so therefore, and the very essence of the Buddha's teachings is all about the essence of the Buddha's teachings, how to reduce and overcome the delusions, because that is the very root of all our problems. Root of individual problems is the root of the collective problems. And so therefore, and delusions in many of the classical teachings that is described is in state of mind. The moment it arises in your mind, that make your mind agitated, disturbed, unsettled. It's a state of mind, it's a state of emotions or feeling, whatever, that the moment it arises within ourselves, that make our mind unsettled. That make our mind unsettled. That make our mind disturbed. So that is, yeah. So that is the, and then within the delusions, the main sometimes describe 3 poisons. The root of all the other delusions is the attachments and the anger and the ignorance, and then within the all of them, So and in many of the Buddhist scriptures, they explain about 6 root delusion and 22 secondary delusions. So I think it is good and nice to study and learn about those different states of minds, how each of those definition of how each of those delusions, how each of them arises, from what cause and conditions, what are the effect of each of those delusions, how it affect us, So first we study from the scriptures, and then we try to, once we have studied from the scripture, then we try to study with our experience what scripture says and how our experience. With our experience, then it is, you learn how to experiment in your lab from your teacher, and then you actually go in the lab and see what you learn was actually really, so you mix everything and try to find yourself. Same thing, that is like you learn from your teachers and scriptures what about those delusions, and then with our own experience, we watch them when we have all these delusions, recognize them, and then see, when particular delusion arises, how does it affect us? How does it affect our mind? What it does to our mind? What it does to our physically? How it affects us mentally, physically? How it affects us and how it affects others? When you have that state of mind, that delusions. So when we understand that, then the teaching become more real, and real, then then it become more personal and experiential. And once you have understanding through that experiential, then it becomes really effective. Otherwise, all in our brain is just like a Google. You type and you have all the information there. So it is all in our brain, and someone says, oh, what's the definition of that delusion? And you can say the definition, or how many different subdivision of that delusion, you can say, oh, this division, this, or what does it does, you can say this and this. But actually, still it is like just counting something outside, So it's really good to study first scripturally and then experientially, with really checking with our own mind, So, and then, then also we understand, as we do that, then also we understand when the Buddha says, or in the teaching, when it says all the delusion arises from that fundamental ignorance, then we understand, oh, what he means. Oh, now I can see with my own experience how anger is arising from that fundamental ignorance, how attachments arising from that fundamental ignorance, how jealousy is arising from the fundamental ignorance as well as the attachments, how resentment is arising from the anger, and so forth. So we will, have better understanding. And then once you understand, then you understand then the importance of the need to overcome that fundamental ignorance. And when you are really understanding that the need to overcome that fundamental ignorance, then the need to develop the wisdom relies on the ultimate truth, because that is the only way that can cut that fundamental ignorance. And in order to have that I think those probably the path will come in other verses. So yeah, here. And again, the actions, karma, how we create through delusion is very clear. When we say something nasty to someone else, unkind, or when we respond unkindly, a little bit mean, nasty, unkind, why we do that? Why did I say something bad? Why did I respond negatively? Check it out, why I did that. Then you see your mind, because your mind was disturbed. Because your mind was disturbed. Because your mind is overpowered by the delusions. So because of the delusions, that is why we behave unkind, mean, cruel. So we then understand how actions or karma is created by our own mind. Not just from scripture, but with our own experience, we understand that. Because you watch it. And sometimes we act in a very kind, nice, gentle. And then you see, oh, today I seem to respond so nicely. Today I seems to, react or respond in much more kinder way, much more understanding way, much more patient way. Why am I acting that way today? And you see, because your mind is more kind, compassion today. Your mind is more peace, compassion. So again, you see your actions coming from your state of mind, how your state of mind is affecting you to act positively or negatively, and thereby creating pain to yourself and others, or kind of joy to yourself and others. I think those are really important, really, for us to trying to understand those, not just from scriptural point of view, but from experience point of view, by relating with our own experience and watching it. As it always says, they say, use the Dharma teaching like a mirror to watch your own being, your own actions, and your own state of mind. And when we do that, then it becomes very, very much more helpful, beneficial. Then it becomes more experiential instead of just intellectual. Then it creates wisdom instead of just a knowledge. And so, and then if we again check it, because we respond, today, a little bit more unkind, mean, and negatively, and because our mind is kind of, disturbed, because maybe our mind was, and then you say, why my mind is disturbed? What was that my mind was disturbed? What made my mind disturbed? Then you see, sometimes we are disturbed by anger. Sometimes we see our mind is disturbed by strong attachments, strong greediness. So then you begin to see how our minds, disturbing minds, come to either attachment or anger. And then you see, where does that anger come from? Where does that attachment come from? And then you go back, then you see it's coming from that fundamental ignorance, because fundamentally, because we think, when you have attachment, the object as, inherently good, objectively, inherently good, so therefore we're attached to it. And when you aversion and strong dislike and aversion, because our mind thinks and believe that is inherently bad, negative from the objective side. And again, and then you begin to see how it comes from that fundamental ignorance. And then, so it is very, very important to check and analyze in that way. So because we hear those teachings all the time, how karma is created by our delusions, and how all the delusions, rest of the delusion come from anger and attachment, how anger and attachment come from ignorance. So we have heard that, we have read it many times, but sometimes we cannot connect very clearly because we have not really checked in and understood experientially how each of them lead to the next state of mind, and how each of them lead to the different behavior and actions, and how that lead to different experiences or result, so I think, so, and we can also talk about delusion a lot, there's I can talk about a lot of them because I have a lot of delusions, so I can talk about my attachment for weeks, I can talk about my frustrating and anger and impatience for weeks, and I don't think you want to hear that. Do you want to hear about my anger for a week? My impatience, my frustrations, my so I think that is so then so basically then we request to the Guru and the Buddhas to inspire us, to guide us, to lead us, and to give us blessings so that we can develop a strong longing or wish to be liberated from all the sufferings and the cause of all the suffering, the delusion and karma. The delusion and the karma. So basically that is what this verse is saying, you know. But it is not enough just asking the, you know, the help, the guidance, the inspirations, the blessings. We have to do the job ourselves. Okay. It's not like we just pray and then we don't do the job. The hard job, we have to do that, you know. You can ask to show us how to do it, inspire us, give us some inspirations, some encouragement, but the hard work, we have to do that, you know. That is the Buddhist approach. Whether you like it or not, you know, that's the Buddhist approach. You have to do the hard work yourself to liberate yourself. And I think we have to understand that. We have to understand that. So we keep on working, you know. Sometimes we are able to practice better than other days, you know. But we have to keep on working and to make the progress. So yeah, I think I don't think I need to go so much details in attachment, even though, you know, we can talk about attachment for long. We can talk about anger, ignorance, but I think, as I mentioned at the very beginning here, I'm just kind of touching, and then hopefully you will be able to study more details. And of course, I think we have Venerable Sangye Kando, who is doing the lamrim courses, and I guess maybe she goes more details in some of those, you know. And of course, when we did the basic program, then when we did the lamrim, we went more details. So, but here, you know, we kind of just touch on some of the topics in more general, without going into detail. And of course, anyone has questions, please feel without any hesitation. I think I see one question here. I see how pain and change can be understood as a range of suffering from the lightest to the heaviest. What are some examples where pervasive conditions can be understood as range from lightest to the heaviest? Yes, I think even in pervasive sufferings, we can also understand that from light to heaviest, you know, because even though our life can be influenced and being under the control of the delusions and karma, but, you know, some individuals, they still have delusion, but not so heavy delusions. For some, they have very, very heavy delusions, you know, very strong anger, very strong attachment, very strong negative. For some, they still have attachment, but it's not so strong, lighter. For some, you know, they still have anger, but the anger is not so intense. And so from that point of view, because your aggregates, your life, your existence is still influenced by the delusion, but it is not by the intense delusions. You know, whereas some others will be influenced by very intense delusions. And same with the, you know, karma. You know, some of them have influenced by very, very strong negative karma, and some of them still influence a negative karma, but not so strong. And even within the positive karma, some of them, the karma is much more stronger contaminated, and then some of them, even though it's contaminated, but not so strong. So, through that, you can understand from being more light and medium and heaviest, so I think through that you can understand in relation to the third one. So that is related that questions. And then there is another, do being in the good God realms continue to create karma, or are they just burning karma? If they are creating karma, why don't they suffer? Mm. Yeah, I think when I was using the six realms, I didn't use the word God. I think I used the Deva, the more Sanskrit word. Okay. And the reason sometimes I don't want to use God is because, again, the words come from certain spiritual background. The moment people hear of God, then they all have that image of different image than what actually described in Buddhism. And sometimes that is where a lot of term we use it, and then people start to relate with the term that come from the that culture, and then they have a misunderstanding of that. So sometimes that is, I have a little bit hesitant to use certain terms, because I see a lot of people sometimes just by hearing the word, they started to connect with others that words come from with different backgrounds. So they still connect, and then they started have misunderstanding and misinterpretations. But anyway, definitely, in God realms, of course, within the God realms, again, in Buddhism, some of the Buddhist classical teachings, they explain about, desired God realm, form God realm, formless God realms, and there are 6 types of desired God realms, 17 type of form God realm, 4 type of formless God realms, so it goes, so a lot. But again, within the God realms, again, they have different, some of God realms, their suffering will change, but some of them do not have. So again, they are not same. That is why they have different level of the God realms, desire God and formless, form and formless God realms. And even within each of them, there are different levels, And then in some of the God realms, definitely, they do not have the suffering, the suffering of pain and suffering of change, even the feeling, they have a neutral feelings whole time. Some type of the God realm, whole time neutral feelings. Neither is pain, suffering or pain feelings. Neither is a joyful or happiness feeling, but it's more neutral feelings also like that. So it doesn't change, like our feelings, from joy to pain and pain to joyfulness and all these kind of things. So basically, so definitely they are burning the previous karma, but at the same time, some of them or most of them, they are creating also karma, but then it is said that human realms is in some scripture they call the realm of karma, and they say the realm of karma because in human realm they say the experience the result of karma is more quick than in many other some of other realms. And so in some other realms, even though they might be creating the karma, they might not be experience the result immediately in this life or immediately, so therefore it doesn't mean that they don't create karma, but also they might not experience this life, and so yeah. So we still have a couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, comments, please feel. Anyone has any questions? No questions? Yes.
Geshe-la, could I ask a
Yes,
question?
yes, please, please.
Thank you so much for your teaching. I was just thinking, I'm noticing like anger coming up a lot because I have sometimes attachment to quietness. And I have one neighbor that is just kind of loud and obnoxious sometimes. I was wondering if you might be able to share some techniques when I notice my delusion of attachment to quiet. In this anger, you know, my mind just blah, blah, blah starts going. Any techniques that could help change the direction in a positive way?
I think, you know, first of all, I think we have to learn to be okay with any kind of environment in our, even though we want to have quieter environment for our practice, meditations, you know, but realistically, that might not be possible. The way the world that we live in a society. And so I think in our mind, we have to train ourselves, you know, I should be happy as long as I'm able to practice, regardless what environment, quiet or not quiet. I should be grateful and I should be very happy that just to get the opportunity to practice, no matter what the environment is, instead of being attached, wanting to have this idea, I want to have the most best environment and quiet environment, you know. I think once you started to feel that every day, oh, I wish I have quiet environment, I wish I have that and I want to have that, then that come into the problem when you don't have that environment. But instead we have to change our mind, you know, all the time. Nothing should stop me from practicing. And I should be grateful, thankful for having the opportunity, regardless of what the environment. And if we just keep on doing that, then with the time, you know, your mind get used to that. And even if it's noise and shoutings, the neighbor shoutings, you know, building their house and mourning their, you know, all of that. When you're trying to meditate, you know, then you started to, instead of being agitated, you just do the practice because that's what you want to, and the environment shouldn't, the noise shouldn't affect you. So I think that is one thing I think we have to train our mind, you know, and also to realize, you know, the person is not, you know, they are intentionally trying to harm your meditation or your practice. You know, they are just doing their things. They have to take care of their home. They have to take care of their garden. They have to take care of things. And so in the process of that, so again, and reminding ourselves, there's nothing personally, someone who has a bad intention to harm or hurt myself, is this is something they have, you know. Unfortunately, the timing maybe was not right, you know, maybe timing wasn't right, but that is how it is, you know. They didn't, and so I think sometimes, you know, it can feel like that they are intentionally trying to make noise when I'm trying to practice and meditate, you know. And when that happens, then that could lead to anger, you know. But being aware, you know, is that maybe something's going wrong in their house or whatever, and they need to fix it. And so I think that could be another way of kind of dealing with that, you know. I think I've shared one story in the past, you know, for as I was talking about my anger, okay. As I said, I can talk about my anger for weeks, you know. So just talk me about one instance, okay. And I have shared that story in the past. Many of you have heard it, you know. When I was studying in Seda, you know, in India, I had another friend, neighbor, and very generous, very kind. So around, afternoon, I think around 2:33, he used to make tea for himself. And then he liked to invite others, when he makes teas. And most time is a time when I'm doing my practice, my kind of commitments and practice. So at the very beginning, I was a little bit rigid, when I was trying to do my best. Basically, when I do my practice, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to get distracted, so I just want to focus on that. But because it's the time that he's making the tea and he want to offer, he used to come and say, knock my door and say, please come, have a tea. And here I'm trying to practice. He comes and asks me to come. One day is okay. Second day, then third days, then your mind started, can't you see me practicing? Can't you see me doing my practice? Why is it so important to have that tea? So now you see my mind starting to get negative. My mind is starting to get negative because I'm so focused and rigid on what that trying to do perfectly, and then, and then slowly your mind gets, maybe he is trying to disturb my practice, because he see me doing that and still he comes and that, maybe he's trying to disturb my practice. So your mind gets, more and more negative. And all is creation of your mind, your drama, creation of drama by your own mind that is upsetting you, making you frustrated, angry. It took me a little while to actually catch my mind that I was upset and angry and that it was not helping. And then I started to caution myself. Why am I doing this practice? Why am I doing this sadhana or my practice commitment? What is the purpose of my practice? And my purpose of practice is to reduce the delusions. And here I'm getting angry. Not reducing it, but getting angry. So then I begin to say, even I'm trying to do the practice most perfectly without distraction, all of that, but actually it's leading to angry, delusions, not the other way around. Then it is not serving the purpose of my practice. What is the purpose of my practice? Is to reduce the delusion. Here is increasing the delusions. And once I came to understanding of that, it took me, I don't know, days, probably a week to catch up and starting to caution. And then once I realized that, then I said, I don't have to be so rigid about that. I don't have to be so rigid. He's being very generous and kind to offer me the tea with the best intentions. It just happened that his tea time and my practice time happened to be same time. And he wanted to offer that. And then, I said, I can go and enjoy the tea 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and I can come and do my practice. I can accept his offer, feel the gratitude, feel the generosity, kindness of him without agitating my mind and without also completely giving up my practice. I just have short break and I go and then come and back, continue to the practice. And then, so that was my experience. One experience and how I was able to catch up. It took time. And then trying to caution why I was angry or upset, and then trying to caution myself. And then once I was able to kind of connect all of that, then, you know, I just had to change a little bit, and and then it was okay, you know. So I don't know whether it helped or not, but I just wanted to kind of share.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So yeah, I think so. Okay. So we do the dedications. Thank you. Due to the due to the merit of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Maybe we can do the Shantidevas. Yeah, after, okay. May all beings everywhere plagued by the suffering of body and the mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtues of my merit. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or even fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depressions. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn and torn be restored, finding repose. May the naked find clothing, hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drink. May the poor find wealth, those who with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicine be effective and wholesome prayer bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever disease they are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightening sick be afraid and those bound be free. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and hope that you know, when you get angry, maybe you can remember my anger and to remind you of that. So, as I said, I can share about my anger for weeks and months.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Okay.